Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneider, joined as always by my co-host Nick Villado. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll notice he's even a shade darker than usual. Never in my life have been more jealous of Nick than his darkness, skin darkness. So first of all, I found out recently I'm 25% Greek. It was one of the greatest revelations of my life. I did a 23andMe. Look, no offense. I love everything about the Jewish culture. No disrespect to my grandparents and people before me, but I didn't want to be 100% Jew. I was very happy to find out I was 25% Greek. We never knew because on my dad's side, he was adopted. So that information came out. And then I wondered, why don't I get darker? I'm so light skinned for a 25% Greek. So then I look over at Nick, who claims to be 100% Italian, I guess 100% Sicilian, because you look at him and he looks like the guy who just goes outside for one day and gets the greatest tan in the world. So he went away this past weekend. Him and his girlfriend had a nice little weekend away, and it looks like you got an insane tan already. So I'm jealous of that.
Well, thank you so much. And I got to say, I did one of those stupid DNA tests, and it came out that I had a significant portion of Middle Eastern. It's part and parcel with being Sicilian. And Sicily is full of a bunch of different ethnicities and everything like that.
And it's weird, too, because both your parents who I've met are like fair skin. So I don't really know.
They step in the sun, though. It's not like that. And I got to say, for you, somebody who is relatively white, you tan very well when you step in.
Yeah, I need to get out in the sun more. It's clear. Not during draft season, though. Who's going to get sun during draft season? And that's why we're here today to talk more draft content as well. Yeah, you had a nice little. I'm going to do it, too, as well, right after. I'm planning to. Well, we don't need to talk about that right now. But anyway, the draft is almost here. We're grinding and winding down. And we got a lot more content we want to hit. So eventually, once we get into that real period of maybe like 10 days before the draft, we're going to hit position previews again like we did last year. We'll do the whole wide receiver position, the whole corner position, sleepers, breakouts, busts, top rankings at each position. But until then, we want to do some fun stuff, and we want to continue to hit draft content every day. So one idea we came up with that we're going to do today is a first-round mock draft where Nick and I are playing general manager. So for this mock draft, we will rotate picks. We'll go one, then the other, one, then the other. We still haven't figured out who gets the odds, who gets the evens. I think we're going to just figure that out in a second. And this mock draft will not be what we did last year, which is what we think is going to happen. This mock draft will be what we would do if we were general manager of each of these teams. I think it's an interesting exercise because it will, one, get us talking about a lot of prospects. Two, get us thinking like an NFL GM and understanding the difference in needs for all these teams and where they might go in the drafts, especially those picking around the Giants. And then three, maybe give ideas about potential trade-ups for the Giants or trade downs, things of that nature. So that's the draft today. That's the content today. Nick, I'm not going to waste too much time here. Would you prefer, and we're both, by the way, we're both going to make the Giants pick, whether that's via trade or just at 25. We don't know yet. Would you prefer the odds or the evens? You're an odds or an evens kind of guy.
I personally don't really give a shit, but I'll go with the odds. I'll go first if we want to just make it easy.
Okay. So we'll make the picks and then we'll both discuss them. So you are on the clock right now. Carolina at first overall, according to the updated draft chart. I use one that I did some research on, and I think the NFL teams use. This is worth 1,000 points. This pick, the Carolina Panthers traded up for this pick previously. I don't think they're going to trade it after, but you do have that option. Are you going to think about trading this pick, or are you sold on one QB, and who is that QB going to be? And remember, this is not what you think they're going to do. This is what you would do.
Okay, so this is what I would do. All right. So they obviously have their eye set on one of the quarterbacks. It's, to me, going to come down to Ohio State's CJ Stroud or Alabama's Bryce Young. The one knock on Bryce Young, Dan, is just the size. And everybody, I mean, it's beaten down to a pulp at this point. I think what the Carolina Panthers are going to do offensively with Frank Reich, it makes more sense to go with a quarterback like CJ Stroud. So I think I'm going to go in that direction and select him, a player who has elite accuracy at all three levels of the field, a player who can make all the NFL throws, a player with a little bit of untapped potential in terms of being a runner. We saw that a little bit in the Georgia game. I don't like skipping over Bryce Young because Bryce Young is my number one quarterback, but I'm going to go with CJ Stroud with this pick.
Yeah, I can see it totally, considering you're looking at the fit with Frank Reich. For me now, at number 2 overall, I'm Houston on the board here, and we know in reality, Houston tried to trade up to number 1 overall. They tried to do the 2-1 swap. They didn't get the deal done, and Carolina swooped in. We know that they haven't really spent that much time with all these other quarterbacks, with the exception of their perceived love for Bryce Young. In this spot, Bryce Young does fall to them at number 2 overall, the Houston Texans, and that's the direction I'm going. If I had the number 1 overall pick, I would pick Bryce Young. I am very concerned about the outlier with Bryce Young. He is not only insanely short, but insanely small. Just from a width standpoint, from a body frame standpoint, even in a sense, he's not really as thickly built as a Kyler Murray type. Now, having said that, if I was just judging on who's the best quarterback in this class, to me, it's Bryce Young by far. He has an incredible natural feel for the game. I think he's an incredible playmaker. I just think he plays the position the best by far of any of these quarterbacks. And I think there's a ceiling for more because I watch him do some of the same things that Kyler Murray did when he was at Oklahoma that made me fall in love with Kyler Murray. That ability to step up into the pocket. And then you have you're not set at all. Your platform is well off balance and you're somehow ripping a ball because you kind of have that Aaron Rodgers feel where you can generate so much power just from that compact motion. And he throws some of the best balls on the run, but he also has some just great in the pocket throws that are just placed perfectly in the spot you want from a ball placement standpoint. He understands the timing. I think overall, he's basically, to me, a much better version of Kyler Murray, but not as good of a runner, if that makes sense. But by far and away a better quarterback than Kyler Murray as far as playing the position with the same kind of natural talent. Now, again, you're betting on an outlier. This dude is insanely small. Not like I said, not only height, but frame wise. So it's a big risk here, but I think it's the pick I would go with here. So now you're back on the clock, Arizona at number 3. This is a prime trade spot. You've got a lot of teams calling. I will give you an even number team that's considering calling down right now. And that is me with my 8th overall pick, the Atlanta Falcons. We are calling. We have interest in something that's still on the board right now. We are calling from 8. So to move from 8 to 3, that's 406 points on the chart is 8. 514 is 3. So we will be offering you our 8th overall pick, and we also will be offering you our 44th overall pick in round 2. So you're going to get 8 and 44. 44 is worth 135. So that makes it a little bit of a trade small in your a little bit in your favor, just slightly, basically an even trade. Are you interested, or are you considering making the pick?
I honestly think the Cardinals are going to get a number 1 pick, even if it's from 3 to 8 for next year. So this trade chart that we're using, it's not science. I would imagine that if they're dropping down even like 5, 6 picks, whatever it is, they're going to probably command a number 1 from next year. If the Falcons are actually sold on the quarterback that they're going to be taking, which I'm pretty sure I know who you would select if I make this trade, but I do believe the Arizona Cardinals will find a way to trade down, but I think it's with the Colts. 1 pick. Do you want to make a trade in that manner, Dan?
The Colts are listening to your offer. They don't really want to move one spot right here. Instead, again, Atlanta's calling you back up. They're angry. You.
All right, I'll make the Atlanta.
No. You don't have to make that trade. You turned it down. They're a little angry at you, but
okay.
Like, it's a fair trade value wise. They're throwing in their 1 now. Their next year 1, but they want back next year 3.
Next year 3. Okay, let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. So the 2 1s, and then you get the 3. So the trade has been completed. Atlanta is now on the clock at number 3 overall. You will now pick for the Cardinals at number 8 overall, Nick. Because we'll just do it like that. Okay. At number 3 overall, the Atlanta Falcons surprised the world by trading up. They haven't shown much interest at all in this class, and they select Anthony Richardson, the quarterback out of Florida. I look at this, and remember, this is what I would do in this spot. I have so much concern with Anthony Richardson busting, but you know how I feel about quarterbacks, Nick. I don't really care about the bust potential that much because I don't think this guaranteed floor is really there for anyone in this class, including Bryce Young based on his frame. There's very few classes where there are floor quarterbacks. Almost every quarterback has a bust factor, with the exception of like Burrow, Lawrence, and those types. So because I know that there's the upside there with Richardson, I love this pick and fit for the Falcons because I already just watched Arthur Smith, their head coach, basically do Brian Daboll and Mike Kafka light last year, in the sense that he generated an insane amount of offense, really good EPA, with absolutely no talent at the quarterback position last year. And a lot of that was via the run game. The Falcons had one of the most efficient for a while for about 60-70% of the season. They were PFF's number 1 rated run offense, despite not really having hogs on the offensive line. No one that graded out real well on the offensive line. This is mostly scheme. Arthur Smith does a really good job of scheming up the run game. He also now brings into the mix Anthony Richardson with Kyle Pitts and Drake London, 2 basketball-type receivers who are unbelievable talents. Now you're telling me that you can basically run that same offense with Anthony Richardson, that Brian Dable and Kafka run, and that Arthur Smith ran at times last year with the Mariota, a ton of boot action, a ton of easy to find throws, everything through the run game, a ton of zone read with Anthony Richardson and whoever they have at running back. And if I'm Atlanta, I'm also going to take a prime running back here if I draft Richardson, because I want to get a lot of talent in my run game. And I really like the fit. And I think this is the one spot to me of all the spots where he could go, Richardson, where he actually has a chance to play and be somewhat effective in year one. This is basically the only spot. It has to be a Dable, Kafka, Arthur Smith type offense where you're mostly just running the ball, boot action, really making things easy and defined for the quarterback in year one.
Replication of what the Carolina Panthers did when they went to the Super Bowl. Remember, they surrounded Cam Newton with Kelvin Benjamin and Devin Funchess. You're talking about 6'5", 6'6" type of wide receivers, where Cam Newton, who was never the most accurate quarterback, could just place the football wherever and those guys would go up and get it. Similar with Anthony Richardson. What's his biggest knock coming into the draft? It's his inability to precisely throw the football on a consistent basis. I really think there's just, everyone does, so much potential with a player like Anthony Richardson, and this is good for the Falcons. And you're up again, buddy, back-to-back picks with the Colts.
Yeah, and I like that comparison to what Cam Newton had, especially because Anthony Richardson and Cam Newton are very similar from an athletic testing score standpoint. Really freaks of nature at the position. Them two, and Culpepper and Dante Culpepper, they're basically the only comparables there. But back on the board at 4, remember this is a mock draft of what I would do here. And I know the Colts have had a lot of connection to Will Levis, the quarterback in Kentucky. I don't see it at all with Levis. If I got to be honest with you, Nick, I don't even know when I would take a Will Levis in this draft, to be completely honest with you. I don't see it at all with this guy. I see almost no ceiling, and I don't see much of a floor. And I know people see the ceiling, but and we'll talk about him when you pick him, because I won't be picking him in this round. So whenever you pick him, if you pick him, we'll talk about him more. But I don't know, man. I don't get it with him. I don't think the arm talent's very good, as people say it is. I know he has somewhat arm strength. I don't even think the arm strength. Some of the go balls Will Levis throws that I watch are like hanging in the air, and then the receiver's like adjusting and jumping toward the ball, and the ball placement is just way off at all times. Under pressure, he's horrible. I know you could say the same thing about Anthony Richardson, but Anthony Richardson's new to the position, and he's also a freak of nature as a runner. Will Levis is not that good of a runner, so I'm not going Will Levis here. I'm going to take Will Anderson, the edge at Alabama. I know a lot of people are somewhat off Anderson, but I just go back to when Will Anderson first broke onto the scene in college football, Nick. At that time, I was like, this is the lock Mario Williams type #1 overall pick. Not same body type. Mario Williams was a 6'7" long defensive end. This is a 6'4" end edge rusher. But I just remember watching him being the most dominant player by far against SEC competition and thinking this is a #1 overall type pick. I know his last season wasn't as good, 2022, but I really like the traits of Will Anderson. I really like his run defense and his ability in the run game, which I think is a very underrated aspect of his game. So I'm taking Will Anderson here at #4 overall. I know I'm drafting strength onto strength. The Colts already have a pretty good defensive line, but now you could turn that into potentially elite defensive line to really boost that defense.
I like that, dude. And now I'm sitting here with the Seattle Seahawks, and there's a player who is still on the board who has some off-the-field issues named Jalen Carter out of the University of Georgia. Now, I know a lot of Seattle fans are probably having PTSD from the Malik McDowell pick, which was a second-round pick, the kid out of Michigan State. I don't even remember what draft that was. That was a little while ago. Did not work out. I don't know if Jalen Carter – well, I know that Jalen Carter has a much more impactful skill set than a Malik McDowell, and I can't really speak to his character. All we know is there's a lot of nebulous around his off-the-field issues with some really serious types of allegations being levied against him. I don't know if Pete Carroll, who tends to kind of side with players a lot and does a good job bringing in, I don't want to say troubled personalities, but people who have question marks and ingratiating them to their football team. But there's also Tyree Wilson, the Texas Tech edge. And they need edge. They need interior defensive line. I think the talent of Jalen Carter, his ability as a 3 technique in an even front run, very often by Pete Carroll's defense, is just too much to pass up here with that type of head coach. So I am going to go Jalen Carter out of the University of Georgia to really shore up that defensive line and create a penetrating 3 technique who is going to harass the NFC West quarterbacks for years to come if he does not lose his head.
And I like that pick a lot. It's intriguing to me because Seattle kind of did that 180 last year, where they in the past had really been big on those, those insane athlete types with crazy upside, but maybe had some off-field issues. And then last year was almost like a 180 where they just really honed in. And I've been reading a little bit about this on character guys. But in this scenario, they're checking out Carter's character. Obviously, they believe that, some of the stuff we've seen in the media is overblown. And we see that all the time, right? It's not just because you see some stuff happen around the draft time, it doesn't mean that is a bad character player. We don't know these people. They know them, right? They're the ones interviewing them. They have all the information they need. We don't have much at all. We have such a small piece of the pie when it comes to understanding these these players off field, and just in general, their character and their demeanor and what they're going to be at the next level, which again, as we've talked about in this podcast, it's like 75% of if this thing even happens for these prospects. So I like the pick a lot. And number 6 overall, the Detroit Lions are on the clock, and I am on the clock. And I'm going with one of my favorite players in this draft class. The more I watched him, at first, I looked at his profile and mainly his size, and I was like, how is this guy considered really a blue chip in this class? Because he's very undersized. And then you watch the film and you're just like, yeah, I get it. I get it completely and obviously. And that's the corner out of Illinois, Devin Witherspoon, by far and away the stickiest in coverage of anyone you'll watch. And it's not even close. I mean, DJ Turner at times has some really good film, especially on the vertical route tree, but the entire route tree for Witherspoon, I know he doesn't play. He didn't there's knocks on him, not only his size. With Witherspoon, the knock is like he didn't face that many good receivers in the Big Ten, and they didn't like match up against Ohio State or something the last 2 years for whatever. Yeah. They're in the West with Wisconsin, where as a Wisconsin fan, we never have to play Michigan or Ohio State. We get like one a year, if at max, which is the greatest, but that'll be reshuffled with the divisions. But as far as Witherspoon goes, it doesn't matter for me that I haven't seen him face the top competition, because you watch him and he's just on the hip of receivers at all times. And then in addition to that, he's insanely good at click and close, and he's insanely feisty around the line of scrimmage. You'll see some reps where he's in zone coverage and he comes off he's just wise enough and football savvy enough to come off that receiver and attack down and make a tackle. He's really good around the line of scrimmage. I feel like just watching him, Nick, he's super smart as a corner. Like, he's clearly done a ton of film study, clearly understands the habits of these receivers he's matching up with. And that's not to say other corners in this class don't share that, but I think he was the best in that regard. And then finally at his pro day, he ran a 4.42, which answered a lot of questions as far as the deep speed goes. And can he recover vertically at the NFL level? So that was kind of the final thing for me. I don't love the fact that he's like well sub 200 for a player taking in the top 7. But overall, I just think he's one of the best players in this class.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Devon Witherspoon, and that leaves me with 2 consecutive picks: Las Vegas Raiders, Arizona Cardinals. Okay. So the Raiders, what don't they need? The Cardinals, what don't they need? Both of these teams are kind of in situations where their rosters aren't all that complete, but we're going to start here with the Raiders. And I wish I did a little bit more work on the offensive tackles in this draft class, Dan, and I haven't. And I know the Raiders need a right tackle. And Peter Skoronski, someone I did study, is actually staring me directly in the face. But I also look at Patrick Graham's defense. And I know Patrick Graham could use his James Bradbury of this defense. And Christian Gonzalez of Oregon, you passed him up for Devon Witherspoon. And I'm not chastising you. I'm not belittling you for doing that, because I love Devon Witherspoon so much. But I do think Christian Gonzalez, he could play man. He could play zone. We know Patrick Graham likes a lot of zone types of cornerbacks, and I think he would be excellent in that click and close, read the routes in front of you type of system. And if I don't go with Christian Gonzalez here with the Raiders, more than likely going to go Christian Gonzalez with the Arizona Cardinals. But I think I'm going to sit tight. Right tackle, I think they have a Luminor, if I'm not mistaken, as their right tackle right now. We're going to have to wait. He's going to play right tackle, and Christian Gonzalez is going to be the cornerback heading to Las Vegas for Patrick Graham's defense.
I absolutely love this pick, Nick. I think you nailed the reason why it's such a good pick, because I like Christian Gonzalez in more of an off-coverage type system in the NFL level. And so meet Patrick Graham, a guy who's going to be using you to your best ability. Like you said, that click and close ability, that ability to play off and just read those route concepts and play it really well. I love Christian Gonzalez anyway in this class. I think he's one of the few, like him, Witherspoon, that we'll talk about more. Will Anderson, players we've mentioned already that are true blue chips in this class. He's one of them, so I really like the fit. Where are you going at number 8 overall with your new Cardinals pick? And are you considering trading down again?
Well, if my phone rings, I guess I will consider trading down again. But I do like where I'm at with Jonathan Gannon as the head coach. This is a defensive guy, and the Arizona Cardinals defense, they lost J.J. Watt. They lost Byron Murphy. I mean, it's atrocious what's going on the defensive side of the football. They lost at Zach Allen, who was a solid, underrated player who was injured last year. And you're looking at a defensive front that is more than likely going to incorporate a more 3-4 type of style with Jonathan Gannon. But they ran a ton of like 5-man fronts over there, where Josh Sweat was like your designated pass rusher. So I don't necessarily think if I were to go with a more even front type of player, a la a Tyree Wilson, it's that big of a deal, because I think Jonathan Gannon will find a way to utilize that skill set. And the Eagles, as we know, they also ran a bunch of even front type of stuff. Fletcher Cox had 1 technique, at 3 technique. I mean, they just rotated their edge rushers. It was a huge part of what Gannon did defensively last year, and it led the Eagles to a Super Bowl. But you look at this defense, who the hell are they rotating, man? They signed LJ Collier from Seattle. You got like Jonathan Ledbetter. It's not a deep group. So I think just adding a player with the type of potential that Tyree Wilson has after you traded down is a pretty wise move. So I'm going to go with Tyree Wilson, the Texas Tech freakly large-sized edge rusher.
Tyree Wilson's interesting to me. I feel like I haven't seen much, but from what I've seen, he feels like somewhat a little bit stiff, but that length and frame and strength at the point of pop, like it's translatable immediately to the NFL level. At worst, I feel like he'll be a good run defender right away. So I like that pick. If I was the Cardinals, and again, your phone wasn't ringing because unfortunately, I'm GM of all the even teams, and none of them want Will Levis. So there's no trade up in sight right now. If there was a crazy good wide receiver one in this class, and I think there is a clear wide receiver one in this class, but not someone teams would trade up for, at least not someone I'm willing to trade up for right now. Maybe I make the trade if there was a great tackle that's somehow falling. Maybe I make the trade. There's one tackle I kind of like more than the other, but I wasn't feeling it with any of my teams. But I will say this, if I'm the Cardinals, I will just be looking to continue trading down in this draft. If I was that GM, I would trade down from 3 for sure, no matter what, best offer I can get, and then look to trade down again because they have just absolutely ruined that roster after drafting Kyler Murray with some of just the most pathetic, worst moves. I mean, look, the Marquise Brown trade was the obvious terrible one at the time, but they've done so many stupid things, just consistently bashing the clicking the button on skill players, not investing in the lines, letting that defense go, letting Hassan Reddick go, like just so much stupid things there. So yeah, I like that move though. As far as getting it back and getting it right, I think that's like a path in the right direction, especially because he fits the system well. So you're actually back on the clock for one more pick in a row. Chicago Bears at number 9 overall.
So this guy is from the Chicago area, even though I believe he is a Green Bay Packers fan. But I'm going to go with Northwestern's Peter Skoronski to go and shore up that offensive line for Justin Fields. Look, Justin Fields did not get a lot of weapons added to his team last year, did not get a lot of offensive line help. But getting a player like Peter Skoronski, who, hey, if he can't play tackle because he has shorter arms, you can kick him inside. He could be an all-pro type of guard. And I know that's kind of a theory that a lot of people throw around, but just watch this kid's tape. He is fundamentally sound. He has all the movement skills that you need. I think he can stick at right tackle, despite the fact that he has less than ideal arm length. And if you want him to play right tackle, I think he will be an above average right tackle just to start off, if that's the direction the Chicago Bears coaching staff want to go in. So I'm going to go with Skoronski here at 9 for the Chicago Bears.
I like that pick a lot too. I've been reading about what Chicago might do, and that's where I found out what you said about him being a Packers fan. But I think this is honestly in their best. It's like it's interesting because they have a player in place at left tackle who they like a lot more. I'm forgetting his name now. They drafted him last year, and Ryan Poles, their GM, is obviously a former offensive lineman. So he's going. In some ways, I feel like Nick, he's going to feel like he can outsmart the rest of the board when it comes to like finding tackles. Braxton Jones, who they said was pretty good last year when they finally put him in. He was like a day 3 pick for them. So
it's not him now. It's Tevin Jenkins, bro. That's who I'm looking to kick inside, and I'm not really even 100% certain if the Bears are feeling that way. I've heard like rumors that they didn't love him, but you never know. I'm on the outside of that program, but I do think bringing in a Skoronski and a Tevin Jenkins and one of those guys could possibly kick inside. And now you at least have options, and you're just adding talent to an offensive line room that needs talent in order to allow Justin Fields to develop as a passer and also allow Justin Fields to do what he can do and what he did last year as just a pure athlete back there. So I think investing in the offensive line is wise, and I don't think you can go wrong with that type of player in Peter Skoronski.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I think it's probably in their best, the best decision for them as well. They've made investments at receiver. Now's the time to upgrade that offensive line. So now sitting at number 10 overall, fortunately, I got stuck with the Eagles in this exercise. So at least the Eagles' first pick. I guess I'm going to get both of the Eagles picks in this draft. And I was sitting at 10, and I tweeted about this earlier, Nick. There are a lot of options for the Eagles here at 10 that are intriguing to me. And a lot of options that could help them long term, right? Like I could get them one of the top tackles right now. You took Skoronski, so that gives me an opportunity to take Paris Johnson if I think he's the best tackle in this class. Darnell Wright, who some people like, Anton Harrison. Long term, that might be the best play. I could even take like a Deontay Banks, who I really think is a great player in this class and just on the teeter. And in some ways is not maybe the best fit for that system, but I think he fits any system really, playing a little bit more off coverage. And that might be better long-term too, right? They re-signed Darius Slay and James Bradbury, but those are both short-term deals. But I'm thinking about the Super Bowl, man. I'm thinking about my Super Bowl window. I'm thinking about how can I best improve my team right now. And so because of that, I'm going to take Jackson Smith and Jigba right here at wide receiver for the Eagles. And I'm going to make things a living hell on opposing defenses for the 2023 season. Now you're going to face an 11 personnel package with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, and Jackson Smith-Njigba. Good luck finding 3 corners who have any chance to hold up, and good luck finding 3 corners who not only have any chance to hold up, but can make it through the season and stay healthy. Otherwise, you're probably going to face a lot of teams that are down to corner 4, corner 5, guys off the street, and now you just have an embarrassment of riches in your 11 personnel. I think for the 2023 season, if they got JSN, that would be their best move to win now. And I'm okay taking a win now swing while also understanding the positional value at wide receiver. And potentially this gives me an opportunity at some point down the line when that contract starts to get into year 4 or the 5th year option to trade Devontae Smith for a new first round pick and more, because Devontae Smith is amazing. And now I have JSN and A.J. Brown. Or to trade A.J. Brown. He's older. He's got a little more wear and tear. You trade him, someone's going to want him. You get a first rounder and more, or whatever it would be there. So that's where I'm going here at number 10 overall.
That sucks, man. I absolutely hate that. Like, can you imagine dealing with JSN? JSN against Darnay Holmes with Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown against whoever the hell else is playing cornerback for the Giants. Dory Jackson, whom I love. Cordell Flott, hopefully he develops. But damn, that would be an absolute nightmare. And you're right, man. Just the rich get richer in that type of situation. And it would be an absolute nightmare to deal with.
Probably the thing I want them to do last. Like, I would rather them take a better player that at a position that won't help them right away than JSN.
I would agree with that. And they're also, Howie Roseman likes to invest in the trenches. So I wouldn't be shocked if they went with even like a Lucas Van Ness from Iowa, the edge rusher. I wouldn't be shocked if they kept adding edge guys, an interior defensive lineman. If Jalen Carter was still around, definitely. And then also offensive line. I mean, you still have Broderick Jones, like you said. Paris Johnson Jr., I feel like, is another really big name out there. And then you have the Bijan Robinson discussion, which I don't know if they would entertain that. I don't think Howie Roseman would, but you never know. We've all been surprised. So, Dan, for the Tennessee Titans, I think I'm going to just add a physical, moldable player who was, I believe, a redshirt sophomore this year from Iowa. He's skyrocketing up boards. I don't love him just because I don't really think he can bend the edge and threaten high side, but I know he's a physical monster who I think has a lot of upside that I think will appeal to Mike Vrabel, and that is Lucas Van Ness out of Iowa, and I'm going to add him to that defense. I think Vrabel will have a lot of fun with a player like that. They got Danico Autry, they have Jeffrey Simmons, and now you have Harold Landry as well, who has had some injury issues throughout his career, but you add Lucas Van Ness to that rotation, and I think that's just going to give you an element of a low or a high floor type of player in terms of playing the run, but it's still maybe not the highest ceiling, but somebody who can use a lot of power to impose his will as a pass rusher. So I'm going to go with Van Ness for the Titans.
If you heard a little bit of a yell and it's something slamming on a desk in your headphones, that was just Bill Belichick over there at number 14 overall, who was thinking and expecting to get Van Ness at 14, who I felt like was the perfect fit for that Patriots team, and now is angry because he didn't trade up and he didn't get him. So at 12 overall, I'm back on the clock with the Houston Texans. I got them Bryce Young at number 2 overall. So now I am considering what I need to do here as a GM, and I want to get one of 2 things I want to do. I want to either help Bryce Young's protection or I want to help Bryce Young's weaponry. And as far as his protection goes, I kind of like where I'm at already. Laramie Tunsil is one of, if not the 5 best left tackles in the NFL. He's in that elite Andrew Thomas tier. They just drafted Green last year to play. He didn't have a great rookie season, but he'll obviously develop. And I forget who now, but their right tackle is that dude they drafted like a while ago out of a small school that's like developed into a solid tackle. So with all that said, and Skronsky not even available anyway to play the interior, I'm not considering offensive line here. I'm going weapon. And this, remember, is a draft of what I would do. A lot of people have Jordan Addison ranked above this player I'm about to pick instead. But when I consider the fit, especially when I consider what Bryce Young is capable of in the vertical passing game with his anticipatory throwing and with his deep ball always just finding a way to drop right in. He throws those deep balls, man. The trajectory, the loft, the touch on those things, dude. The anticipatory throwing, the anticipation. I just love watching his deep ball, man. And I think Zay Flowers is the pick here at number 12 overall. Zay Flowers, to me, is one of the only receivers in this draft who I think can be, or I think has shown the ability to project as a 3-level threat at the NFL level. That means intermediate, short, and vertical passing game. I love his vertical game. I really do. I know he's undersized, Zay Flowers, but man, that release off the line of scrimmage is something that I'll always be focused on when I go over these receivers. I don't see it with Addison and some of the other undersized receivers. I see it with some of, obviously, like Jalen Hyatt has it. There's guys down the board who have it, but Zay Flowers has so much else to his game as well. So I love giving Bryce Young Zay Flowers. I know I now just drafted for the Texans 2 dudes who are like sub 190 and sub 6 foot, which is not exactly adhering to my planet theory that I do believe in and I'm interested in for the Giants and in general when drafting. But I don't care, man. These dudes ball out. They know how to play. And I honestly feel like if Zay Flowers wasn't stuck at Boston College, he would be like a top 10 obvious pick right now.
I don't know, that size is a little bit of a
Yeah.
concern to me. So, but I do agree his production would be more than what he had last season. So now I'm picking the New York Jets. So the New York Jets are sitting there at 13. The Jets have this really all-star defense. Can I add Brian Branch to it? I mean, is that something that they were going to look to do? That secondary is already stacked. Robert Saleh knows what he's doing on that side of the football, but we know Aaron Rodgers is possibly, I mean, he's Aaron Rodgers, who knows, but he's possibly coming over to be the quarterback here. And you have Mekhi Becton and I think Max Mitchell with Dwayne Brown as your tackles. Can you rely on Mekhi Becton? I'm not really 100% sure. We haven't really seen much from him throughout his career, despite the fact that he was so highly regarded coming out of the 2020 draft. Max Mitchell, we liked him going into the draft, but can he be a full-time starter? Not certain. I'm going to go with Paris Johnson here. Just really shore up the Ohio State tackle. Just really shore up their offensive line for hopefully for the Jets fans, inevitable addition of Aaron Rodgers.
I like that. And I think the Rodgers thing is going to happen at some point, probably draft night, I think, or in that range. And I really like that decision. I think the key thing here that you focused on was we can't trust Mekhi Becton right now. Not only has he not proven that he can stay on the NFL field, but he had a major surgery people don't realize last year. So, like, I know I've seen some photos of him in really good shape, but I'm not worried about Mekhi Becton being in good shape to start. I'm worrying about, can he make it through the NFL season? Can he even make it through a few games on those knees? Again, surgically repaired knees and 360 pounds you're putting on them on every single snap. That's a lot of weight to put on those. So, I mean, look, the fact that he already has those injuries makes me, rule him out as potentially being someone I can count on at least. So I really like this pick by you. Who were the other tackles you considered here? I'm just curious about that.
Would be the Georgia tackle, Broderick Jones. Peter Skoronski is already off the board at that point. Yep. And again, I haven't watched the tackle position extensively. So there could be guys who are projected second round dudes who I really appreciate, but I haven't necessarily grinded through their film, and I've only seen them through cross-checking. Those big three that I've named are the three that really kind of stick out as first round guys. I know DeJuan Jones is also like somebody I considered for the Titans. I don't know if he's being mocked in the first round, but just planet theory, as you said, when you're that long, that big, you could be like Orlando Brown and say what you want about Orlando Brown and how bad his combine was. He's been a pretty damn solid, sturdy starter for the Ravens and now the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. So DeJuan Jones, another Ohio State tackle on the opposite end. And I watched some of his tape on the airplane actually against Michigan. And there were a couple plays where Michigan pass rushers just ran at him and he it didn't even look like he was trying, just put him down.
He has that snatch and trap really well. He does a really good job of that snatch and trap.
So I don't know if he'll be a first round pick, but for a guy of his size, to me, from what I've seen watching other players, I think he should be, because he has pretty light feet for a guy of that size. So I haven't done an evaluation on him, but I do appreciate DeJuan Jones's game too.
It's so funny, Nick. Sometimes I feel like it's like you can read my mind on this show. It's really weird at times, especially this one, because this one had no context at all. But I asked you that question because one of my sleepers for this mock was DeJuan Jones. Before this mock, to prepare for it, I just tried to watch a little bit of like all the top draft prospects who aren't on the Giants' radar. And he's not often mocked in round one, but watching a little bit of DeJuan Jones, especially like not only that, I've seen some clips from the Michigan game. I just feel like he should be drafted in the first round. He's going to be, because of what you just said. It's the combination of one, the planet theory. He's so freaking long and big, and his wingspan, by the way, is insane. I don't know if you've seen it. It's absurd, but also he's light on his feet. Like I expected going into watch game, like this dude is going to be like, and he doesn't have the greatest foot speed, but he has the light feet and that nimble quickness to his feet that I really like. In addition to, like you said, there's some reps where he has a really good snatch and trap, where you'll see him put guys on the ground. I just think this is the type of guy I would want to bet on if I was an NFL GM over some of these other dudes. Like I watch Project Jones. I'm not a huge Project Jones fan. That's not a guy I would take. I see the upside with Paris Johnson. I don't know. This tackle class to me is not very good outside of Skoronski, who knows if he's going to play tackle. But DeJuan Jones was the one who intrigued me, because I'm like, he's insanely long, incredible wingspan, incredible size, and surprisingly light on his feet.
There's also Darnell Wright, too, from Tennessee. Yes. You got to bring him up. Now, he has some technical issues. He's a really nasty type of blocker, had a solid Senior Bowl from everything that I've heard and everything that I've seen from watching the Senior Bowl tape. And he also did really well against Will Anderson, which carries a lot of weight, because Will Anderson is one of the few blue chip prospects heading into this draft.
And I like him a lot too, by the way, right? Okay, so now we're going to get to the New England Patriots on the board here at number 14 overall. They're pissed off. They wanted Lucas Van Ness. I'm considering a player who I really love, but I'm hoping he falls to the Giants. So I don't waste it. But again, this is what I would do rather than what I'm supposed to do. And I don't think I'm going to go corner here, even though those are probably the BPA right now, because I just think Bill Belichick has a tendency of not drafting corners early and then developing him with really good coaching. And he's done a really good job of that. I don't think he'll go away from that. I've considered their offensive line could use some work. I consider some offensive linemen here. But I'm going to do something that is going to, no, I'm not going to do this because I wouldn't do this. So I can't do this. But I was considering Bijan because I think the Patriots are the type of team that would consider taking Bijan at 14 overall. But I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that.
They would be the type of team, Dan, that would select Bijan Robinson and then give him 9 carries and some UDFA is going to come out of nowhere.
So yeah. And they'd be like, that's all right. He's serving a role on this roster. He's playing special teams. All right. So instead, what I'm going to try to do here is I really think if they're going to continue along with this Mac Jones thing, they have to find him some better weapons here. So I'm going wide receiver here for the New England Patriots. And I'm looking at the board and again, this is more of what I would do rather than what they would do. So we have to stick to that. And I'm going to go with Quentin Johnston here. A player who, again, this is what I would do. I don't think he necessarily perfectly pinpoint fits this style of offense that the Patriots run, the Earhart Perkins, and I just don't think he's really the type of guy that they would maybe consider after their problems with receivers like him who are big, N'Keal Harry, who they busted on. But I'm just not going to take a Jordan Addison over him because I think Jordan Addison has to be, to me, he's better in the slot, the NFL level. I don't think he has a fast enough release off the line of scrimmage to win vertically often on the outside. And Quentin Johnston, to me, has the upside to potentially be the best receiver. He's by far and away has the biggest ceiling of any receiver in this class. And he presents a nice target for Mac Jones, can help them after the catch, which is the one way he fits that system to me is his ability after the catch, because that's something that's really underrated about his game. 2 things I like about Johnston's game is his ability to chew up yards with his stride length and his ability to just threaten deep corners who are just going to be, there's going to be a slew of NFL corners, even at the NFL level, Nick, who are just like 5'11", 6 foot, 5'10", because that's just the nature of the position. And they're going to match up against the Quentin Johnston. They're going to have to give him space, and he's going to chew up that space. And then if you throw underneath, he's better against the catch. So there are things I like about his profile. And so I'm going to go Quentin Johnston at 14 overall to the Patriots.
Quentin Johnston to the Patriots. So that would be something that I would love to see, just because so many wide receivers that are selected by Bill Belichick, they don't end up panning out. And I don't want to see Quentin Johnston not pan out, but he is somebody that I have a lot of question marks about. So I would like to see how that would be utilized within that offense. We've seen so many young wide receivers go to that offense and just disappear, like Tyquan Thornton last year, even though he dealt with some injuries. But now I'm sitting here, Dan, the Green Bay Packers. And Brian Branch is still on the board, but I look at their secondary. You have Jair Alexander, you have Eric Stokes, the kid that they drafted from Georgia, who was playing really well for them. You still have Rasul Douglas. Safeties, they still have Darnell Savage. And I'm like, can Brian Branch come in and play nickelback for them, play safety, have some sort of versatile role? I know in Vic Fangio's defense, they run a ton of like cover 4 match type of principles. And I think Brian Branch, his intelligence is processing. He would do so well in that system. But I'm also still considering tight end. But this is a really deep tight end class. So I kind of want to go Michael Mayer. But I think I'm going to go with Brian Branch and just kind of add a very just intelligent, smart, physical-ish, I would say he's physical type of player in Brian Branch to that secondary, which has a lot of talent, but really just kind of, to me at least, sucked last season. Like Joe Barry, every time I was watching a Green Bay Packer game, I'm like, why the hell are they blowing all this coverage? I think Brian Branch can really help solidify that, and he can play in a lot of different roles for Joe Barry's back end of that defense.
Oh, it's so sad because Brian Branch in the process, Nick, has become one of my favorite targets for the Giants, my favorite realistic targets for the Giants at 25 overall. Because, like, obviously I would love Deonte Banks. Obviously, I personally would love Joey Porter. I don't think either are going to be there. And I look back and I've really warmed up to Brian Branch because I think he would just be the most immediate help for the Giants. And at 25, I'm okay taking a more surefire player because there's so much bust potential at that pick with a lot of these undersized receivers or these corners who are going to try to convince ourselves on. And they have a ceiling, but they also have a much bigger floor outside of the big guys. And then you look throughout the rest of the draft. I don't really want an edge for the Giants this draft. At 25, like I just wouldn't prefer it. So it sucks to see him go off the board, but I think you're right. Some team will take him. I am curious how it plays out after what we saw last season with Hamilton out of Notre Dame, because Kyle Hamilton to me was supposed to be like a lock top 3 guy. Like just on the film alone, he looked awesome. I know he didn't test that well, but to me, he was a better prospect than Brian Branch. And he fell to what, like the teens with the Ravens, like right 14, around this range, 14. Yeah. So if he's falling to 14, will Brian Branch fall to 25? I think it's a little bit possible, but I just think ultimately one team will take him. So that kind of sucks for the Giants later, but it's okay. We move on. It's what you would do, and you would definitely take him here. And I like that pick. 16 overall, Washington. I have a lot of different options. To me, this roster is not that great, besides the defensive line, which is their best thing. And they've got some interesting young linebackers, especially with Jamin Davis. And weirdly, actually, no, I'm looking at it now. Did they not re-sign our boy who had that amazing game against the Giants, who's been in the NFL for 70 years?
John Bostic?
No, Bostic. I don't think Bostic's on this roster anymore. So Bostic's just like a free agent. He had an unreal game against the Giants, just a career game against the Giants out of nowhere. Bostic. And I don't think he's on the roster anymore. So I love Cameron Curl. That's a player who was great against the Giants. So I don't think I need safety here. Not that there's any that I would consider anyway. I don't care that they signed Andrew Wiley in the offseason and Charles Leno is on this roster. I hate this tackle situation for Washington. So I'm going to go tackle here. And again, this is what I would do. I think the best overall tackle left on the board is Darnell Wright, but I think he's better as a right tackle. And I know they signed Andrew Wiley to play right tackle, but they do have Charles Leno. I just feel like they're both meh to me, Charles Leno and Andrew Wiley. So I'm just going to do what I would do. I don't like Broderick Jones as much from the little I've seen, or Harrison. We talked about DeJuan Jones, who will come up at some point, but I'm not ready to do that right now. So yeah, I'm going to go with Darnell Wright, and I'm going to stick him right in at right tackle. If not right away, I'm going to let him compete at guard, where I also think they could use help there too. Andrew Wiley, I know, is there, but he could also kick inside potentially. So I'm just okay providing competition and improving what I think is the biggest weakness on that roster.
Dan, Pittsburgh Steelers are up, and I'm fascinated by this selection because they're at 17. Joey Porter Jr. still on the board, and he is a legacy type of pick because his father was a great for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But I also look at their edge situation. They like Highsmith, who to my understanding has played well. Obviously, you have TJ Watt. Behind that, you have like Quincy Roche and players like that, who Giant fans are quite familiar with. And I think if you added a player like Nolan Smith, the Georgia pass rusher, somebody who is very physical, I feel like he looks to me like a Pittsburgh Steeler, and you have a pass rush with TJ Watt, Highsmith, and Nolan Smith, that makes a lot of sense. But then you look at the back end, the cornerbacks. Yes, you signed Patrick Peterson. Patrick Peterson is like 33 years old, 32 years old. He's a little bit older of a prospect. You're not going to not draft a cornerback, especially somebody with the type of upside of a Joey Porter or a Deontay Banks, just because there is a player like Patrick Peterson on your roster. You have Levi Wallace on the other side and Kilo Witherspoon, so not a lot of depth there. Terrell Austin is now their defensive coordinator. I know he used to run a lot of cover 3, but now with the NFL kind of transitioning to much more match and quarters and things like that, he might have transitioned with that. I'm not really 100% certain. I haven't really followed his career too intently, but either way, I think they're going to go with the legacy pick here. I think he fits what a Pittsburgh Steeler is. It's just a physical type of player, and I'm going to go with Joey Porter Jr.
Oh, I love that pick, and I'm a big fan of Joey Porter. We'll talk about it more in the corner pod. I don't know when this is airing and when that aired, but it sucks because I was considering corner coming up with one of my picks. Not this next one, though. This next one, I'm back on the board at 18 overall with the Detroit Lions. And the Lions obviously took Devin Witherspoon earlier in this mock. They took Aiden Hutchinson last year. I'm considering adding edges as well just to really boost that up. I also considering a player like Brian Breesy here because I think that would be an interesting player to put in the middle of that defensive line. But I'm actually going with a pick that I know all Lions fans will hate because NFL fans are very fickle and they're very much slaves of recency bias in a lot of ways. So they remember the TJ Hawkinson pick from a few years ago. They remember the Eric Ebron pick from a few years ago, and they don't want tight end early, but I don't give a crap. I'm giving them a tight end early here. And I have 2 tight ends who have now moved into basically what I consider my top tier for tight ends. And it's Michael Mayer and Dalton Kincaid. They're different kinds of tight ends. Kincaid's a little bit older too. He's my number one tight end in this class is Michael Mayer. And this is a mock of what I would do. And I would take Michael Mayer here. And I think in a lot of ways, if Michael Mayer wasn't stuck on Notre Dame, he would right now be a lock. Just like I said about Zay Flowers, I think he would even more so be a lock top 10 pick. Because when you watch Michael Mayer, you don't need to focus on some of these things that you're focusing on with these other players as far as production goes. There's so many stupid plays where they're throwing little screens, stuff around the line of scrimmage to him. But when they actually use him as that intermediate threat, he looks freaking awesome out there, dude. And he looks so much bigger than the competition. He's a long stride runner. He has a huge catch radius. Everything thrown in his direction gets caught. He's got great body control in the air. And I think from what I've seen, he's got more post-catch juice than you would expect for a bigger prospect like him. He, to me, profiles as a potential elite tight end as a receiver at the next level. I know the blocking's not there yet, and some people question if it'll ever be there, but at least I get a frame with him. I get a frame that can block at the next level potentially with Michael Mayer. So Michael Mayer is my tight end one overall. He's one of the prospects I honestly like most in this class. Like I'd consider him borderline. I consider him a blue chip prospect. For me, I know tight ends. People don't love tight ends. This history is terrible. You don't want to draft him around one. To me, he's a different prospect. And again, if he just wasn't stuck on that shit Notre Dame offense, he would have been like, put him on one of these sick offenses. Like imagine, there's so many coordinators I can think about that could use him better. And I think he would have been an obvious top 10 pick, even at tight end. So he's my pick here at number 18 overall. So I give the Lions Devin Witherspoon and Michael Mayer.
Michael Mayer putting it on the list. And now we're at 19. So the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are another one of these teams that could kind of use a lot of everything, right? Like they could use an edge rusher, I think. They could use a cornerback, even though they still have Carlton Davis and they retain Jamel Dean. But I still think releasing Donovan Smith leaves just a huge hole at left tackle. And I don't really know anything about who is going to play left tackle for them right now. So that leads me to Broderick Jones of the Georgia Bulldogs, somebody who has won 2 national championships. He's a sophomore. He's a young player. He might not be the most refined in terms of pass protection, but he is a pretty physical and aggressive guy in terms of run blocking from what I've understand. Again, I haven't evaluated him, but I've seen a decent amount of Georgia's offense. And I think at this point of the draft, adding him to pair with Tristan Wirfs gives you 2 young bookend tackles for whoever the hell is going to be the quarterback post Tom Brady. So I'm going to go with Broderick Jones here for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 19.
I like this pick a lot for them. They need to figure out. I mean, they got Tristan Wirfs, obviously, and some people have been like, oh, I'll kick him over to the left side. But he's been playing right side for a while now. I don't see any reason to kick him over unless you really have to. So this gives them the option to not have to do that. So I think this is a great pick. Okay, now I'm on the board with the Seahawks with their second pick. You picked the first one, and it was Jalen Carter. And I look at this roster, man, there's not that many holes. They've done a really good job figuring and fixing out this roster from what a lot of people thought was one of the worst in the NFL, and they were due for horrible times after Russell Wilson to now becoming like a really pretty damn good roster. They've set a tackle after drafting 2 last year, both who stood out. They have a good running back. They have 2 good starting receivers, but they could use potential. They could use a potential kind of, I don't know, like second guy, and I don't want to say second guy. Lockett and Metcalf are both great, but like the next thing up because those guys, at least Lockett is an older receiver. They like Tyreek Woolen. He was a great pick for them. They're pretty good at linebacker, especially after signing Bobby Wagner. You got them Jalen Carter. They're good at safety now with Diggs and with Love. So I'm going to just draft strength on current strength, and think a little ahead at wide receiver here. I'm going to take the player I would take at wide receiver here with this pick, and that would be Jordan Addison, who I think is a nice fit for them as well because he can move right into the slot there with Lockett and Metcalf on the outside. And my deal with Jordan Addison is I don't want to say that I don't think he's that high of a ceiling player because I do see a ceiling, but to me that ceiling has to be in the slot. I don't see him as much of a potential outside guy as Zay Flowers. And I've made that point before, and I'll make it again. To me, Addison is going to be best fit in the slot at the NFL level. And so that's where they'll put him right away. And they have a really good 11 personnel package now for next year for Geno Smith, improving pass protection. I really like where the Seahawks are headed if they can get Jalen Carter and Jordan Addison out of this class.
I find the Addison pick fun, man, because DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jordan Addison as an 11 personnel package with that rushing attack that we know Pete Carroll employs. That to me can be really dangerous off the play action with Ken Walker toting the rock. So I really like that pick there. Los Angeles Chargers, bro, I struggle with this one. I really do. Because if we look at what they did last offseason, they bring in Sebastian Joseph Day. They add Austin Johnson. They add Giants legend David Moa. So they're really trying to secure the sieve that they were as a rushing defense that placed them out of the playoffs in that game against against Las Vegas, if you remember, in the previous season. So I look at the Chargers, and I'm like, they could use another wide receiver with Mike Williams, Keenan Allen getting a little bit long in the tooth. I like a lot of day 2 receivers, though, so I'm not going to go in that direction. You have some edge rushers still around that I really like. Nolan Smith is still around. Absolutely love that selection, right? As a possible third, I don't even want to say third wheel because Khalil Mack is getting a little bit old, but pass rushing is king. But I also look in their secondary. Love Asante Samuel Jr. Michael Davis, he got re-signed to a second contract after outperforming in his rookie deal. To my understanding, Dan, he didn't play all that well last year. And I think if you add a player to pair with Asante Samuel Jr. in Maryland cornerback, Deonte Banks, it really helps solidify your secondary to go with the safety that you have in Derwin James. You also have Alohi Gilman back there. But you play the Kansas City Chiefs twice. You need to try and slow down their passing attack. Best of luck. Deonte Banks, he's not going to slow it down, but it at least adds a man coverage cornerback who can be a nuisance along with Asante Samuel Jr. So I'm going to go with Deonte Banks out of Maryland. Sorry, Giants fans, he's not falling to 25.
I love this pick by you for all the reasons you broke down, but also because I think just from a pure value standpoint, Banks is one of the 10 or 15 best players for me in this entire class. So you get him at 21 overall, and that's just great value in my opinion. And like I said, NFL's pass happy. We need to find guys who can slow down these passing attacks. Deonte Banks can help them with that. But at 22 overall with the Baltimore Ravens, we're somewhat pissed because we wanted to do the legacy pick with Banks, who played at Maryland, and just bring him over there. He only has to drive a few miles down the road to get to the Baltimore Ravens facility. But we're okay because as a Raven GM, we need corners, but we're okay because we found the most Raven picks right here. And you mentioned him earlier in your consideration for the Chargers, and that's Nolan Smith, the edge rusher out of Georgia. I mean, this dude's character is off the charts, which checks well with the Ravens, but also he's just built like an edge that the Ravens have found a way to maximize over the years. So Nolan Smith to me is, I would consider my favorite edge in this class. It's not the greatest not my favorite edge in this class. My favorite of the non-elite edges, like I have Will Anderson obviously above him, but like once you get into this range, my favorite are remaining edges. I like him more than BJ Ojulari. I like him more than McDonald. So to me, they're taking the best edge left by far. And I think a case can be made Nolan Smith is the best player on the board right now too. So it's a great fit for them at 22 overall, and Nolan Smith's a pick.
Absolutely love Nolan Smith. If he was there at 25, I would consider him. I think the Giants could use an edge. I really do, but I ultimately think the Giants will more than likely go cornerback, wide receiver, but I think it should be in the consideration. Ernie, of course, he said it best. You can never have enough pass rushers, man. Nolan Smith is a very high upside type of pass rusher, but I'm sitting here at 23, damn. Minnesota Vikings, what don't they need? I think the interesting pick here that I wouldn't do, because I'm not a huge believer in his game, would be Will Levis, just because Kevin O'Connell is a branch.
I cut you off for a second.
Yes.
I really thought you were going to go with somebody else here, and I was going to applaud it.
I'm not going with Will Levis.
No, I'm saying, but when you started that whole thing, I thought you were going to go with something else. You know what I'm thinking of?
No, I don't actually.
Hendon
What
Hooker.
position? Offensive, defense?
No, Hendon Hooker.
Oh, okay. Well,
I thought you might consider Hendon because I think at this point, I'm pretty sure I would take Hendon Hooker over Will Levis.
As would I, but I had a whole reasoning behind this. And it's just because Kevin O'Connell is going to know Will Levis's skill set, because Kevin O'Connell is a branch off of the Sean McVay tree. And Liam Cohen, his offensive coordinator in 2021, when he had that really successful season that vaulted him all the way up until this high draft talk, is also a branch off that same tree. So Kevin O'Connell knows Liam Cohen very well. He's going to know if Will Levis has what it takes. I don't really love Will Levis all that much. I think Hendon Hooker would be an excellent pick here. And you know me, I'm a huge Hendon Hooker fan. I do like Hendon Hooker from what I've seen better than Will Levis, but I do think I'm probably going to go in another direction. And I'm looking at the corners, man, because you have Andrew Booth Jr., who didn't really play all that much, drafted him in the second round last year, and a Caleb Evans, who was a 4th round pick, who I think you bring in Byron Murphy as your nickel back, and then Harrison Smith, who is older, and Cameron Bynum. We saw how bad that secondary was, but now you have Brian freaking Flores there. And what does Brian Flores do as a defensive coordinator? He likes to run a lot of man coverage. He likes to bring pressure. That's the type of defense similar to Wink Martindale that is going to be employed by the Minnesota Vikings. And I'm going to make this very difficult for the New York Giants here. I'm going to go with Cam Smith. I think South Carolina cornerback Cam Smith is going to be the pick here, and he's going to slide in and be the starter opposite the second round pick, Andrew Booth, with a Caleb Evans being that third outside guy that they can rotate. And this is a good man coverage cornerback who I wish was a little bit more physical. And Cam Smith, he's a high tackler, always going after the midsection, always going after the chest. Hit low, bro. Hit low. So there are elements of his game that I don't love, but in terms of man coverage skills, even though he gets a little bit grabby now every now and then, I do appreciate Cam Smith's game, and I'm going to go with him for the Minnesota Vikings. I think Brian Flores would appreciate his man coverage ability.
I remember, for those listening, I know I've said it a bunch, but I'll say it again. This is a mock draft of what we would do as GM. So clearly you can read into that and take away from it that Nick is very high on Cam Smith, and he's a player that you would consider for the Giants at 25 overall. And that's Cam Smith, the corner out of South Carolina. There are 2 South Carolina corners, Smith and Rush. So just to keep just kind of a reminder on that. At 24 overall, I'm back on the clock here with the Jacksonville Jaguars. I got to say, man, another team, like I talked about it with the Seahawks, how they flipped that roster so fast. Dude, the Jaguars roster looks pretty freaking good. I was looking at it, man, and it's like, how did they flip this thing so fast? Because they, too, were in a really bad position, picking number 1 overall with Trevor Lawrence literally 2 years ago. And I was thinking about defense here for a lot of reasons, and corner was definitely on my mind. But you've taken all the corners that I would consider taking here, so I will no longer consider corner. It's just not for me. If they ran a little bit of a different system, I might consider Emmanuel Forbes. But I don't really like the system fit there with Forbes here, so I'm not going to take that. I love what they did at linebacker in the draft last year, and I think they're feeling pretty set there. They have found some really good production out of their interior defensive line, guys like Devon Hamilton and Harris Robertson, who people, who's that guy? Who's the guy from the Jets that I don't like? They have like some options there as well, so I don't think they're going to go interior defensive line here. I'll say this. I don't know if they're going to go in this direction, Nick. I would guess they won't. But I find it odd that they let Jawan Taylor walk in free agency and he signed with the Chiefs. Like, I just found that odd. They're a team that has a ton of cap space, quarterback on a rookie contract. So I think what they're thinking here is Walker Little, a player who we kind of liked a good amount. He had that injury profile, but he was okay. Like, there was some upside. Is just going to slide right in at right tackle. But this is what I would do, not what I'm thinking they would do. So I'm going to go tackle here, because what I would do if I ran this franchise looking at this roster is I need to protect Trevor Lawrence. I'm not letting Jawan Taylor just walk and like, oh, Walker Little will just step right in and it'll be fine. Like, at the very least, I need competition for Walker Little. So I'm going to take the player we talked about earlier, who I don't see mocked often in first rounds, but I like a lot. DeJuan Jones, the tackle at Ohio State. Planet Theory, baby. The dude has insane wingspan. He's insanely big. He has snatch and trap. He crushes people at the line of scrimmage. And you would never expect it based on that profile, but surprisingly nimble feet. Really, surprisingly nimble feet. So to me, like, I would take him over a lot of these tackles in this class personally. That's the type of bet I would make. And here with the Jaguars, I'm making that bet here at 24 overall, and I'm finding them another player to protect for Trevor Lawrence. So now we're up at 25 overall, New York Football Giants.
So if you're watching on YouTube, you can notice that we plugged all of these into an NFL draft simulator to see what picks are still available using PFN's rankings. So the highest ranked player is the guy I'm going with, Will Levis. No, I'm just joking. But Will Levis, Miles Murphy, Bijan Robinson, Brian Bresee, Isaiah Foskey, Keely Ringo, Dalton Kincaid, Jalen Hyatt, Trenton Simpson still around, BJ Ojolari still around. I think, Dan, in this situation, I'm looking to trade down. I don't love the board right now. I have cornerbacks, Keely Ringo, DJ Turner, who I'm going to entertain. I would entertain Emmanuel Forbes. I will entertain Julius Brents from the cornerbacks that I've seen. Safeties, no. Linebackers, Drew Sanders and Trenton Simpson and Jack Campbell, I don't love here. I would rather trade down and see if they were available a little bit later. Miles Murphy, that's a good bang for your buck. I haven't done an evaluation on him, but I think the Giants could leverage his skill set as an edge rusher, somebody who can align a lot of different places. Same with some of these other players like Keon White from Georgia Tech. I think Will McDonald is a nice edge rusher that you can entertain. Brian Bresee, Kalijah Cansey, 2 players that I am also willing to entertain at this spot. And then on the offensive side of the football, the wide receivers, I don't want Jalen Hyatt here. I like Josh Downs. I'm not selecting him here. Cedric Tillman, I'm a fan of. Not selecting him here. And then it comes to the center. John Michael Schmitz and Joe Tippmann. I'd rather not do that in the first round. So are there any options for the Giants to trade down? I don't even know if we should allow that, because I feel like it's copping out, because we set this up perfectly for this to be a very hard decision.
So I'll say this, Nick. I think in this scenario, and this is not even the worst case scenario for the Giants. Crazy enough. This is a bad scenario for the Giants, but somehow it's not even the worst case because in this scenario, there were a lot of tackles who came off the board. Like, I'm not so sure DeJuan Jones is going to be a first round pick. I don't even know if Broderick Jones, I don't think the NFL likes him. We'll see on Broderick Jones. Like, some of these tackles might not even go off the board. Even Cam Smith going off the board is nowhere near a guarantee before the Giants pick. Some people think Cam Smith will be a second round player. Now, some team might go crazy for like a Jalen Hyatt earlier. It's definitely possible. There's definitely possible there could be more receivers, but this is not even the worst case scenario for the Giants. So I think, look, for this exercise, we're doing a full round mock draft. We can't not make a pick for the Giants, I don't think. But in this scenario, I'm with you. If this plays out like this, I hope Joe Shane trades down. I don't even care if he doesn't get a 5th-year option. I don't care if he trades out of the first round. Like, I don't mind as many spots as he needs to get value back, whatever the best deal available is, however many spots that is. Somebody might want Hendon Hooker here. They want to trade back up for Hooker. Or in this scenario, Will Levis, right? Because Will Levis is still on the board. This is what we would do. Remember, it's not what we think will happen. In what we think will happen, there could be a team ready here to take Will Levis or Hendon Hooker, and they want that 5th-year rookie options. They want to make sure they trade into round 1. So the best case scenario for the Giants, I think, is to trade back. And this is scary, Nick, because this is kind of, I feel like, close to how this might actually play out. And I think we're going to get to the point where I don't really want the Giants to make this pick at 25 on draft night because there's a lot of reaches here. I know who I would take if the board played out like this. It's between 3 players for me, and I know who I would take out of those 3. But having said that, the ideal scenario here is to trade for sure. So let's make the pick, though. Let's assume that we're going to make the pick. The Giants, you're stuck here. You can't get a good deal. No one's offering you good value. You're forced to make the pick. The clock's ticking down. You don't want to Minnesota Vikings this thing and let the draft clock run out, and then another team picks ahead of you. So you're ticking here. You didn't Dave Gettleman. You didn't turn the Barkley pick in within a minute. So what are you going to do here?
So I wish I finished my evaluation on DJ Turner because I'm considering 2 cornerbacks right now. And the cornerbacks that are available right now, according to PFN's rankings, is Keely Ringo out of Georgia, DJ Turner out of Michigan, Clark Phillips III out of Utah, Emmanuel Forbes out of Mississippi State, Tyreek Stevenson out of Miami, and Julius Brents out of Kansas State. And I'm considering 2 of those players. And I think I'm going to go with Emmanuel Forbes. I could easily go with DJ Turner here. I have watched, I think, a game and a half of DJ Turner's tape. Some of it was on the airplane ride to Cancun. And I really liked his coverage ability and his man coverage upside. He was a bit smaller. But Emmanuel Forbes, his ball skills, his anticipatory skills in terms of breaking on routes, they're unique. I mean, you don't tie the FBS record for all-time pick sixes by mistake. And I'll say a couple of those were a little fluky. A ball got kicked up in the air for one. Another one, it was some kind of crazy happenstance that resulted in him having an easy pick 6. But some of them are just him diagnosing what's about to happen. Him utilizing film study to break on footballs like the 4th and 2 against Will Levis in Kentucky for a touchdown. So I really think there's a lot of upside. It's just he's 166 pounds. It's an outlier. This is a big man's game. I'm fully aware of that. But we also saw Joe Shane go out and draft a guy like Cordell Flott last year in hopes that he is going to grow into his frame a little bit. Maybe you could think that same way about Emmanuel Forbes. I think he's a little bit high cut in the waist. Despite that, I still think he's solid in man coverage. I don't think he's the best cover guy in man coverage, but I think he's good enough to warrant a back end round 1 type of pick in a system that blitzes all the time. You need cornerbacks who are excellent in terms of contested catch situations, getting their hands on the football. And Emmanuel Forbes is one of the best in college football at doing those things.
More like all likelihood, the Giants aren't going to get a good chance to get Joey Porter or Deontay Banks here or Brian Brand. So it's like this board is likely to play out poorly for the Giants, unfortunately, at 25 overall. With my pick, again, we can't trade down. If I was going to go corner here, it would be between Forbes and DJ Turner. I really like DJ Turner. Watching just from what I've seen with Turner, I know you said you want to complete your evaluation on him, so we'll wait for that. But out of all the corners I've watched in this class, besides maybe Ringo, I think Turner is the best vertical corner in this class. He just does not get beat on go balls, and his recovery speed is incredible. I mean, he tested 4.27 in the 40-yard dash, and that's all evident on his film. Like, he is going to be the guy you can put on an island against Verta and not worry about getting burned over the top, which I love. I also think he's just a pretty good corner overall when it comes to just being sticky in coverage on all sorts of routes. I worry about DJ Turner, though, when it comes to dig routes, in breakers over the middle against physical wide receivers, because he is really, really small. I also worry about him in some ways in run support. I actually think he's pretty solid in run support, and he was coached well there, better than some of these other guys, but he's also insanely small, and that's a problem, especially if you're going on the, some of these teams are going to run power gap type concepts to the outside, and you're going to get these guys, you're going to have this guy trying to like contain, right, against the receiver who's most likely bigger than him. Same thing basically goes for me with Forbes. What I love about Forbes is his playmaking upside. The Giants desperately need playmaking upside in the secondary. We don't talk about this but with the new role that Xavier McKinney's playing is like not anymore in that deep half. He plays the deep half sometimes, but not often. He's not really making the same kind of interceptions and big plays on the ball like he did under Patrick Graham. The Giants didn't have almost any interceptions last year. They were one of the worst teams in the NFL when it came to interceptions. Having a guy like Forbes, who, like you said, yeah, there's the one that tipped off the foot, but overall, this dude has great freelancing skills and is right often. He's right more times than not. And he had 6 pick sixes in his collegiate career. That's insane. He would bring a playmaking style to the Giants defense. I worry about Forbes at 166 pounds against the run. Like I just said with Turner, it's even more of a bigger concern. I also feel like with a player like Turner, there's some room to grow within his frame. With a player like Forbes, I'm like looking at that frame on the field on film, and I'm like, where's he gonna grow into this frame? Like his legs are so skinny, and I don't really see that changing. I think that's just how he's built. So I really worry about him against the run. I also just worry about him against like physical wide receivers if he's trying to press them and he's just gonna get pushed right off the snap right away by basically any kind of receiver. I almost feel like Forbes would be a good pick for another team, not the Giants, like a team that plays more of a zone heavy scheme where he can play off all the time. That's where I would like Forbes, but I do agree that he's so fun to watch. He's got great coverage skills and he's got playmaking skills. So both those guys were in consideration for me, but they're not my BPA. If the Giants hadn't traded for Darren Waller, Nick, I would be taking Dalton Kincaid here, and I'd be really happy with it. I think Dalton Kincaid is the best player on the board. I would even be okay with them taking a swing on a Luke Musgrave, a Darnell Washington to put as like your extra offensive lineman at the end of the line of scrimmage as your wide tight end. Now you can run a real good power game with Saquon Barkley and whoever else is at running back, and Daniel Jones keeping it, bootlegs, you flip it to Washington, who, by the way, is a better receiver than people realize out of Georgia, Darnell Washington. He has some really good after the catch skills, and he had a really good yards per catch despite not being quote unquote in the pass game. But the Giants traded for Waller and they have Bellinger. Unfortunately, they can't take a tight end here. At wide receiver, I wouldn't take any of those guys at 25 overall that are left on the board, so I'm ruling that out. And so I'm left here. I can't take a tackle, right? We're the Giants. We can't do that. Interior offensive line, like, I don't love any of these interior offensive linemen that much. Osiris, like the kid from Florida, I don't know. I don't think I would want to take him here. So for me, I'm looking at a combination of 3 players that I think could potentially be the best player on the board and help the Giants right away. Breesy, Miles Murphy, who has length and size, but there are question marks in his game, and Kalijah Kancey out of Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And from what I've seen of those 3 so far, I've by far seen the most of Kancey, so I hope that's not biased, impacting my eval. But from what I've seen so far, Kancey is by far and away the one I'm most excited about. Kancey would be my pick here, Kalijah Kancey. I think you throw him right in there on the interior, and you just give Wink Martindale a dude who can win pass rushing reps over and over and over again against these NFL guards. These dudes who play guard in the NFL suck for the most part of pass protection. Like, they're hidden by the tackle sometimes or the center, and some of them are good, but most of them struggle big time in pass pro. Same goes for center. Now you have Kancey, you add him to the rotation, but also just more importantly on passing downs. He's just always on the field. He's never going to come off the field. And eventually you move on from Leonard Williams potentially. Now you have Kancey and Dexter Lawrence long term. So for me, Kancey would be the pick, the interior defensive lineman out of Pittsburgh.
I absolutely love that. An interior defensive line, it could be that. And I know a lot of Giant fans might not appreciate that. I think Kancey adds a totally different element than anything that the Giants currently have on their roster. But not only that, You're right. He's going to be isolated in one-on-one situations. What does Wink Martindale like to do? He likes to align 7 guys up on the line of scrimmage. What does that force the offense to do? It forces them to go one-on-one. And when you have somebody with the type of lateral movement skills and the lateral agility that a Kalijah Kancey possesses, he's going to win some of those one-on-one battles. And he also, and just aligning 7 guys on the line of scrimmage also manipulates protection and leads to these free rushers. But you also have that just given ability that Kalijah Kancey possesses to win the one-on-one battles, that if you don't have the free rusher, you can still get pressure into the quarterback's face just as a one-gap penetrator. And that's his best trait, is just penetrating gaps. So I don't hate that pick of Kalijah Kancey. I don't know if I would hate I don't think I would hate the Brzee pick. It's just, there's a lot of projection there because he had a really, I would say, unique college career in terms of the injuries that he dealt with and the death of his sister. But there's so much potential with a guy like Bryan Bresee. He was the #1 recruit for a reason out of Maryland. So I don't hate the interior defensive line if the draft were to fall this way, but I also don't hate going with an Emmanuel Forbes when we know the Giants need cornerbacks. So I'm fine with both of our picks in that situation. And from what I've seen from DJ Turner, I'm okay with it there. I wish Julius Brents, the Kansas State kid, was a little bit better in terms of his vertical speed and his recovery.
Yeah.
I have a little bit of concern there because we saw Quentin Johnston just feast on him in the Big 12 championship game. I wish he didn't play in that game, Dan. For his sake, because
but I think if he had that vertical element to his game, and he was 4.53, and you can tell on tape he doesn't have that recovery speed. If he had that, I think he'd be a top 10 or top 15 pick because he has literally everything else.
He had insane three.
Everything else is there. Everything else is there.
Got porn star length, bro. Just straight up porn star length.
Not only that, it's like the film shows it too. Like he's good. It's not just that he has the drills that say he's good short area quickness. He's good in those short routes and like things that he's that are breaking back inside or back toward the line of scrimmage.
And say if the Giants did go with Cansey in the first round at 57, if Brents was still around, that's a pick I'm willing to absolutely make.
Or
so Julius or Turner. I think Turner will be gone by that point, but crazier things have happened. So I like the combination of Forbes and Cansey from the Big Blue Banter guys.
I missed a guy though here, Nick, that I actually probably would have taken second after Cansey here if I really it's tough. He's in the mix of these four because if he just had one, if he was just a little better at one thing, though, I think it's possible he can be coached at the next level, and that's tackling. There's just too many missed tackles. But I really would consider also Drew Sanders at this pick, to be completely honest. And I know it's funny because everyone says, oh, Trenton Simpson's the perfect fit for Wink Martindale because he can rush the passer and because he can drop. I think Drew Sanders is a better version of that. And I think about how often the Giants have five guys on the line of scrimmage, like those edges from the outside and those three interior defensive linemen, those guys on the edge. And you don't know if Wink's going to drop that dude or if he's going to rush the passer. Drew Sanders is a guy who can step right in and play that exact role where he has the pass rushing skills, but he could also drop in coverage. And he probably has, I know he has the length. I think he has the athleticism. I think he can get better and better in that regard. So he could immediately help this team as well. So he's someone I don't want to rule out. I just think it's a little bit too early because the missed tackles scare me.
And again, he's a linebacker, but he really is a linebacker and an edge. Like if Nolan Smith was still around, I would entertain Nolan Smith, but we already selected him. BJ Ojulari and Will McDonald, I like both of them, but I don't think I want them necessarily at 25 because they lack the physicality that I want in my starting edge rushers. And we already have a slight issue with Azeez Ojulari in that category, but a Nolan Smith doesn't lack that physicality. A Drew Sanders on the edge doesn't really lack that physicality. He just has the tweener thing going on, but I think he would be a fine fit for what Wink Martindale wants to do, and I think that's a solid call. But again, this is even not a great situation that we found ourselves in, and here we are talking ourselves into some picks that I feel like would be a value here at 25 to some extent.
Yeah, for sure. All right, I'm back on the clock here. Dallas Cowboys, number 26 overall. This is an interesting spot as well, I think, especially after they made the trade for Brandon Cooks. A lot of people put them at wide receiver here. But I think after that trade for Cooks, that's probably going to be something they'll consider moving or not doing right away, especially because they have they've re-signed Michael Gallup to that big contract. They might be regretting it, but they did re-sign him to that. And again, this is supposed to be what I would do. But even in this spot, I don't think I would take a receiver. I don't really love any of the receivers left in this spot. I don't like any of the interior offensive linemen left in this spot, though I don't think they have to worry about that either. Let's be honest, Nick, this is a freaking good roster. I'm looking at it now. I don't know if I see many holes on this roster. If anything, I would maybe consider corner a potential hole long-term because they traded for Stephon Gilmore, which was a low-key good move under the radar, and they have Trayvon Diggs, so it's not like they need that now, but maybe long-term. I don't know, man. There's just nothing of need on this roster. It's pretty insane looking at this roster. I think interior defensive line can improve, though, honestly, if I'm looking at it. So this is where I'm going to take Brian Bresee here. I think it's a BPA type pick for them. I think that's the one thing they could probably stand to upgrade, I guess, is their interior offensive line. I don't know, man. I mean, they could use a linebacker, too. Like, this would be an interesting spot maybe for Jack Campbell, but I just don't think they're taking a line. I mean, they did take Leighton Vander Esch in the first round. So it's not like the most crazy thing I've ever seen. So I maybe I would, and again, this is supposed to be what I would do. So let me just make that clear. What I would do here is take Brian Bresee. I think he's the best player on the board. I think he helps their interior defensive line.
Brian Bresee, I mean, I wouldn't want to see him in Dallas because I think there is a ton of potential there for him. Now I'm up here with the Buffalo Bills, and I know they brought in Connor McGovern. They have Mitch Morse at center. I don't know much about Ryan Bates. And then your tackle positions are solidified, but they have their pickings here at interior offensive line because they're all still available because we haven't selected an interior offensive line. I think they could possibly, I mean, I would like to say use another wide receiver, but I believe in Khalil Shakir. I do. Gabriel Davis definitely didn't advance himself as much as I feel like a lot of us expected after the 4-touchdown game against the Kansas City Chiefs, but a lot of those top receivers that I respect, they're off the board. at this point. And I look at a guy like Osiris Torrance, who is still on the board. I might go in that direction, add a player like him to really help solidify that offensive line to keep Josh Allen upright.
I love that pick, Nick. I really do. I think the one thing the Bills needed from watching them last year, especially losing the Bengals in the playoffs, is physicality up front on the offensive line. For a while there, they were just like, we have Brian Dable, we have Josh Allen. We don't really need that good of an offensive line. We could do a middling offensive line. It's going to be fine. Last year, it wasn't fine. And I think a big part of that was they didn't have any kind of balance at all, and they didn't have any kind of physicality in the run game. So that's an immediate answer for that. So that's, to me, one of my favorite fits in this first round.
Are you going to do it, bud?
Oh, I'm going to do it. You knew I was going to do it, right? And it's funny because, okay, so I'll do it here, and everyone who's going to hear this is going to be like, what are you? This is you and Nick are the guys who said you would never take Saquon Barkley at number 2 overall. So let me make this clear. With the 28th overall pick, I am taking Bijan Robinson at 28 overall to the Cincinnati Bengals. And let me make the point right now. Taking a running back at 28 versus taking a running back at number 2 overall when you can trade number 2 overall is not remotely the same. Just look at the trade value chart. Number 2 overall has 717 points on this trade value chart we're using. Number 28 has 209. You know what second round picks are worth? You could get pick 32, 33, and 34 in addition to 28, and it wouldn't even add up. Or maybe it's damn close. It's probably pretty close. It would add up to about the second overall pick. So these are not comparable picks between Bijan Robinson at 28 and Saquon Barkley at 2. They're not even remotely comparable from a trade value standpoint. Secondly, the Giants weren't in a Super Bowl window when they took Saquon Barkley at number 2 overall. Like, no doubt about it, they were not in a Super Bowl window. The Bengals, they are. They're in a Super Bowl window. And more importantly, Saquon Barkley, you could make the case he was like the best prospect in that class, I guess. But when you consider positional value, I don't even know. But regardless, there were other guys in that class who you could make the case for as the best overall prospect. In this class, the flip side, Bijan Robinson's probably one of the 10 best overall prospects if you take away positional value. Honestly, probably like the 5. He's maybe like the first, second, or third. He's like as good, people say, if not better than Saquon Barkley. And to me, watching both of them come out, I would rather have a Bijan Robinson than Barkley, personally. Would you agree with that? If you were an NFL GM, skill set?
I think it's close. I think Barkley has a better just athletic profile, but I think Bijan is a better running back more than like when they came out. So I probably lean Bijan, but
it's just
love. Yeah, it's a slight lean, just lean in a
slight lean. But either way, so he's one of the 3, 4, 5 best prospects in the class. I'm getting him at 28. I'm in a Super Bowl window with Joe Burrow. I don't then have to pay the position. I can get rid of Joe Mixon, save some cap there. I can make the decision to use him for 4 years. I get the 5th-year option. I do that. I franchise tag him 1 year after that. All of a sudden, I get 6 years of Bijan Robinson, team cost control, no major cap hits down the line, and then I let him walk. And by that point, they're going to need to because Burrow's going to have a huge contract. Higgins, Chase, they're going to have any cap space for this type of player. I like it. I like it a lot here. I think this might actually happen, too, in the NFL draft. Now, more than likely, I think he'll go earlier than this because the NFL is just going to be like, this dude is too good of a prospect to let fall all the way to 28. But if he's still there at 28, I think the Bengals will make this pick.
And now here we are. And I love that, by the way. I was hoping you were going to do it. Yeah. It makes sense. Joe Mixon, he's probably out the door. There's some weird stuff going on there with Mr. Joey Mixon. Bijan Robinson with that offense. I mean, that's really exciting. The New Orleans Saints, bro. This is what I'm thinking, right? They could use, I feel like, some sort of defensive lineman. I am eliminating Kalijah Kancey from the board just because we both made picks for him. So Kalijah Kancey would be in consideration here, but I want to take him off the board. And I look at what the Saints need. Could they use a wide receiver? Maybe, right? Maybe they drafted Chris Olave last year. Michael Thomas, I don't know what the hell to expect from Michael Thomas. A tight end, you're talking about Juwan Johnson, Adam Troutman, Taysom Hill, that trio of tight ends. Could they use a tight end? Sure, to help Derek Carr out a little bit. And there's quite a few tight ends who are available, but I also like the idea of adding Myles Murphy or DJ Turner to pair with Marshawn Lattimore and Paulson Adebo. And DJ Turner, is he going to play the slot? Maybe. Joe Woods is now your defensive coordinator. He's going to run, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he comes over from Cleveland and he ran a lot of zone type of principles. So I think with that also in mind, maybe you could go with a more zone-oriented type of cornerback like a Clark Phillips III or a Keely Ringo. This is what I'm going to do. And I really do like what I've seen from DJ Turner so far. So I think I'm going to go in that direction and select DJ Turner here. I know it's a little bit early, but I think there's some upside here with a player like this. And I do believe if you look at the Saints roster, they could possibly use that as well, even though they have Bradley Roby, Marshawn Lattimore, who can't really stay healthy, and then Paulson Adebo, who I think has had an up and down career since he was selected in the third round 2021 out of Stanford.
Yeah, I like this pick a lot, and I think it's definitely in the range of what they would consider doing here at 29 overall. So I'm going to move to 30 overall here, back on the clock with the Eagles. Somehow I got all the division teams in this mock draft, I guess, taking the Eagles. So the Eagles need to look ahead to the days when James Bradbury and Darius Slay won't be on this roster. They're older corners. Things fall off fast for corners. But all the corners I want here are gone. I would love Emmanuel Forbes for the Eagles. I think he's best fit for that kind of system personally, where you just play off the whole time. But he's gone. He's off the board. And now we have some weird rules here because the Giants essentially made 2 picks here. But it's okay. We're rolling with it. And he's off the board. So I don't really like any of the corner fits here for the Eagles. So instead, I'm going to do something that not only Harry Roseman would do, I would do here, because I think he's potentially the best player on the board, and it's so Eagles to take a player like this at this spot, and that's Myles Murphy, the edge rusher, who has the length, has the size to fit that system, in my opinion, and is overall just the best player on the board here. He adds, again, I know they had an amazing pass rush last year, but they did lose Javon Hargrave. This is not a defensive tackle, but I still think he's going to add to their pass rush, and what did they have? Like a league record-setting 72 sacks last year? Well, now they lose Hargrave, but they add another pass rusher.
Hey, I love that. They're always going to add these pass rushers. Myles Murphy, from what I've seen, and I watched a decent amount of Clemson's tape, but I was more focusing on Trenton Simpson and Brian Bresee. But from what I've seen from Myles Murphy, he's a high floor type of player who I feel like the Eagles will get a lot out of, just to add to that just massive rotation they have with Josh Sweat and freaking Hassan Reddick. And God, I hate the Philadelphia Eagles. But 31, Miami Dolphins don't have a pick. So the Kansas City Chiefs are sitting here at 31, the Super Bowl champion. What do they need? I feel like they can use edge help, which is funny because they spent a pick last year in the first round on George Karlaftis, the Purdue edge rusher. But behind him, you have Charles Omenihu, who I feel like is a good player, who was a part of my group back when I was at the Reese's Senior Bowl. And he fell to the 6th round for certain reasons, I guess. Chris Jones, Derek Nottie. So you have a solid defensive line, like their linebackers. I think they could use some corner help, but I think adding another pass rusher for Steve Spagnuolo to utilize is probably their best move to keep a successful team together. I know a lot of people say, add Jalen Hyatt. Like, I'm not that high on Jalen Hyatt. And I think there are other speedsters that you can get a little bit later. So I don't necessarily want to go in that direction, although I understand why people would like to go in that direction. But there are a lot of guys here that I do appreciate. I like all the edge rushers that you see. Isaiah Foskey from Notre Dame, BJ Ojulari, Adetomiwa Adebawore from Northwestern, Keon White from Georgia Tech, Felix Anyudike Uzama from Kansas State, and Will McDonald and Tuli Tuipulotu. I like all of those guys, and Derek Hall. So who am I going to go with out of those players? Thinking about Andy Reid, he likes these big body, physical guys that you could put inside at edge for Steve Spagnuolo, or do I go with a smaller guy in BJ Ojulari or Will McDonald, who's like shot out of a cannon and who can flatten and bend the edge? I think I'm going to go with Will McDonald here. And I'm going to make that selection. Now, this is somebody who's not the best against the run right now, but he's more of a pass rushing specialist. And I feel like he offers something a little bit different from George Karlaftis, who's more of that battery guy who's going to run through you, short arm type of player. And Charles Omenihu has like 36 plus inch arms, but is more that just end. And I think you add a player who can win high side and be a pass rushing specialist on the Kansas City Chiefs, where a lot of teams are going to be passing, it makes sense. And the only reason I go with McDonald over Ojulari is I believe in McDonald's athletic profile a little bit more than BJ Ojulari's, although I do really like BJ Ojulari. These guys, I have him, I think it's the same grade, but I'm going to lean McDonald, who was a bit misused at Iowa State, playing a 3-3-5, where he was like a 4 technique and a 5 technique instead of aligning wide and just allowing his burst and explosiveness and bend to just absolutely embarrass a lot of those Big 12 offensive tackles. So I'm going to go with Will McDonald out of Iowa State.
I love hearing how much disdain you have for that 3-3-5 Iowa State run. Just from a projection standpoint, when you're evaluating prospects, you hate it so much hearing about that, talking about that 3-3-5. Yeah. I like the pick a lot. I was hoping you go a different direction. You know who I wanted you to take here, who I would have fucking loved for the Chiefs at 31?
No, offensive defense.
On the board, too. Offense.
Is it a tight end?
Oh, yeah.
Dalton Kincaid.
Oh, my God. Imagining him in that offense with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and Travis Kelce. Like, I freaking love the idea of Dalton Kincaid in that offense, honestly, man. And they could use him in such a variety of ways, too, like that move tight end position. So That's a buy I would go with, but I like the going edge here too, because look, you got to keep shoring up the edge if you're one of these Super Bowl rosters. In general, it's probably a good move. All right, that's our mock draft. We're going to go over it real quick, what we picked here. First overall was the Carolina Panthers, CJ Stroud. Nick made that pick. Second overall, and I'll just say Nick has all the odds. I have all the even except for our trade. We made one trade. That was the only one we made. We ran out of steam a little bit on the trades. We tried to do something there. 2 overall for me, Texans, Bryce Young. And just a reminder, this is all what we would do, not what we think will happen. Number 2 overall, Bryce Young. Number 3, Anthony Richardson. This was my pick because I traded up. Number 4, Will Anderson, the edge rusher to the Colts. Number 5 overall, Seattle Seahawks, Jalen Carter. Number 6 overall, Detroit Lions, Devin Witherspoon, the corner. 7 overall, Las Vegas Raiders, Christian Gonzalez, the corner. Tyree Wilson, the edge, at 8 overall to the Cardinals. 9, Bears, Pete Skoronski, the offensive tackle / offensive guard. We don't know where he'll play yet, but he'll be good no matter what, I think. Number 10 overall, the Eagles. I went Jackson Smith and Jigba. Number 11, Lucas Van Ness, the Titans. Number 12, the Texans get Zay Flowers to pair with Bryce Young. Number 13, the Jets take Paris Johnson, widely believed the best tackle in this class, though some people have arguments to be made about other players. 14 overall, Quentin Johnston to the Patriots. Remember, this is what we would do. I don't think Belichick would make that pick, but it's what I would do in that spot. 15 overall, the Green Bay Packers, Brian Branch. Love that pick by you, Nick. 16 overall, Washington Commanders, Darnell Wright, the tackle. 17 overall, Pittsburgh Steelers, a little legacy pick here, Joey Porter Jr. Like that pick as well. 18 overall, Michael Mayer, the tight end to the Lions. 19 overall, Broderick Jones to the Buccaneers, another tackle. 20 overall, Seattle Seahawks take Jordan Addison, the wide receiver. 21 overall, the Chargers take Deonte Banks, the corner we want for the Giants. 22 overall, the Ravens take Nolan Smith, another corner. 23 overall, or I'm sorry, the edge. And then I'm looking ahead to the Vikings, who take Cam Smith at 23 overall at corner. DeJuan Jones, the tackle to the Jags at 24. Then at the Giants pick, Nick takes Emmanuel Forbes, the corner. I take Elijah Cansey, defensive tackle. Forbes out of Mississippi State. Then at 26 overall, the Cowboys take Brian Breesy, interior defensive lineman. 27 overall, the Bills take Osiris Torrance, the guard. 28 overall, the Bengals take Bijan Robinson, the running back. 29 overall, the Saints take DJ Turner, the corner out of Michigan. A lot of corners in this draft and a lot of tackles. 30 overall, the Eagles take Myles Murphy, the edge. And then 31 overall, the Chiefs take Will McDonald, another edge. So we head into day 2 like this. That was our round 1 mock draft. We hope you guys enjoyed it. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you soon.